Hello everyone, it's time for the second video that a lot of people have been waiting for quite a while, and that is the healer comparison for Module 16. Now before you all go ahead and say, well, healing's not useful anyways, there's no point in being a healer. Well, actually in Mod 16 healing is pretty relevant for a lot of things. They've redesigned combat to the point where your health is going to be going up and down in combat. It's not going to be like you're either full health or dead. That's pretty much going to be gone unless you get hit by a direct attack from like the final boss and you're not a tank, I guess. You could probably get one shot from that. But anyway, what we did for this is I got a group of people together and we did 3 runs of FBI with the same group composition. The only difference was me on a different healer each time. And I took note of my experiences, what I thought was good and bad during each run, and what I'm going to be explaining to you today is the strengths of each healer, their weaknesses, all the different healing options they have, except for feats. I'm not going to cover feats because pretty much all the feats of each healer are healing related, so. And then I'm also going to talk about their tab mechanics, and, which by the way, the tab mechanic on PC is the R1 button on PS4 and RB on Xbox. I've never owned a console in my life, so in the last video somebody pointed that out to me, so I thought I would include it this time. You're welcome. I'm also going to take a little brief overview of the style of each healer. You're going to be seeing some video example as well in the background as I start talking, just so that you can see what each one is like in combat. However, please consider that some of the things specifically with cleric have changed in the past week and a half, so it's possible that your experience will be slightly different than mine than what is shown in the video. Also, I shouldn't have to say this, but this is just my opinion based on my experiences, and your experiences and your opinion might be different than mine. Alright, so first up on our list is cleric, but we are going to talk about some things that they all have in common first. All 3 healers have a resource that they need to manage. Clerics and paladins have divinity, and warlock has the soul sparks. Also, all 3 of them have an encounter power that removes a negative status condition from either a targeted person or a group of people, and the negative status conditions are things like poison and the partial paralysis and stuff like that. Okay, now on to cleric for real. Let's start off with the cleric's strengths. Clerics have large outgoing heal and damage bonuses that they can apply to themselves, either through feats or the exaltation encounter power and class features even, and so on. As a result, they can be built as a hybrid healer and DPS, which the other 2 healers do not have this option. In the video in the background, you'll see that I built as a full healer. I did that with all 3 classes just to see what it would be like. And cleric is probably the one that I felt least useful as a healer. I would have had much more fun if I was built as a hybrid. Adding on to what I said earlier, they are the only healer that has significant self-damage buffs. Specifically talking about exaltation here, which is a 20% outgoing damage and outgoing healing bonus. That's a lot. That's more than any other class. Clerics also have the largest number of healing options. They have 12 different powers or features or dailies and stuff that can heal, while the other classes have 10 and 11. And I think that's a little bit interesting considering that they are the class that can deal the most damage of the 3. Next up is weaknesses. Now there's only really one main weakness that I could think of for clerics, and that's that they cannot move while they're channeling divinity or when they're channeling astral shield, unless they have the specific class feature slotted that allows them to do so, and only then you only move at 50% speed, so you're half as fast as before. I actually thought about this for a while and I couldn't really think of any other specific weaknesses that they have. Next up is the cleric's style, and as I already kind of said, this like twice, but their general style is big healing and then some DPS, specifically AoE DPS. Their only real options for DPS are Daunting Light, which is AoE, Sunburst, which is AoE, and then there is Geas, which is the single target debuff power, and then Flame Strike, which is an AoE. There's also Guardian of Faith, that is single target. Now, onto the actual healing powers of the cleric. Casting these healing powers costs your resource, which is called Divinity. To regenerate Divinity, you can do so through various class features or other bonuses, but the primary way is going to be holding Tab, which is your channel Divinity. Holding that regenerates your divinity over time. And as I said earlier, you cannot move while you're doing this or execute any other actions or anything unless you have the class feature slotted that allows you to do so. So the first healing power we have is Soothe, which is a single target at will that heals over time whenever you target a target ally or yourself. Next is another at will called Blessing of Light, and this used to be called Blessings of Battle if you're familiar with that, and this one does not actually directly heal anybody, but using it increases the effect of your next healing spell by 10%. So I think this is something that I would probably keep slotted. Next up is Bastion of Health. We are all familiar with that, unless you've never played a cleric before. But Bastion of Health was a huge thing prior to Mod 16, assuming you needed to heal for some reason. It is an even bigger thing in Mod 16. The heal magnitude is very large, and it has a pretty large AoE as well. Next up, we have Healing Word, and you might be familiar with this one as well. It is an AoE that heals yourself and nearby allies. It's not a line in front of you anymore, it's actually an AoE around you. It also has the added effect of healing over time for, well, it says that it lasts for 21 seconds, but I feel like that's not right because then it would just be up 100% of the time and you wouldn't even have to try. I don't remember that saying 21 seconds before. But moving on. Next up we have Exaltation, and this is a self-buff. It is not a direct healing encounter, but what it does is it increases your outgoing healing and damage dealt by 20% for 8 seconds, and that is a very large buff, especially considering that a lot of classes don't have a damage buff, and if they do, it is not nearly as large as this. Next up on our list is Cleansing Light. This is an AoE encounter that removes a negative status condition as well as healing. Remember that negative status conditions are things like poison and partial paralysis and, you know, you get the point. And now we have Astral Shield. You should all be familiar with that one as well. It was very common prior to Mod 16, even in high-end parties sometimes it was still used. However, this power is now channeled, meaning you can't move or execute additional actions whenever you're channeling this power. You basically stand there and hold the duration as long as you would like. It reduces the damage taken by the party members who stand in it by 10%, and also has a heal over time that's pretty small, but it lasts for 10 seconds, or until you cancel it. And the last encounter is one called Intercession, and this is a completely new one with Mod 16, and it instantly heals the nearby party member with the least amount of hit points, and the heal magnitude is ginormous. It is 2,000, so that basically means that you're going to be healing them pretty much to full health. This one does not cost divinity, and instead has a cooldown of 23 seconds. I have not found it necessary to use this power, but in certain situations I'm sure it could be useful. And now we have Hallowed Ground. This is one that was huge prior to Mod 16, it's still pretty okay. It reduces the damage taken by people who stand in it by 10%, and it has a heal over time for 12 seconds with a pretty large, decent-ish magnitude. However, the radius of this power is much smaller than before. So you do have to take that into consideration whenever you're deciding where you want to stand to put this thing on the ground. Next we have Anointed Army. This is like the daily of Anointed Champion clerics prior to Mod 16, but now it's not really that good anymore. All it does is restores HP whenever their health falls below 50% or upon expiration. The heal magnitude is very large, but it's only useful if people are falling below 50% health, which if you're paying attention, they really shouldn't fall below 50% health anyway, unless they get hit by a really large boss attack or something. And lastly, for dailies, we have Guardian of Life. This one is probably my favorite daily that the devout clerics have, and what it does is it grants a healing over time effect to yourself and nearby party members, with also a large base heal in the beginning. It lasts for 12 seconds. That gives you plenty of time, if you're short on divinity, to restore enough divinity to use some encounters to get more healing up for whenever it ends. And last but not least, there is a class feature called Soothing Prayer. I'm only talking about this one because it is a actual thing that heals you, and basically whenever you channel divinity you receive a heal over time for a pretty small magnitude, but if you're pressing tab every now and again, it's good to have a little bit of a heal. Now, do I use this one? Probably not, but I just thought I would mention it anyway. Like I said, I'm not going to be talking about any of the feats that clerics have that enhance healing or give healing, because pretty much every single feat is dedicated to healing in some way, because this is the healing paragon. However, there is one pair of feats in the cleric's paragon that deals with bonus damage, and neither of the other two healers have any damage-based feats. That's about it for cleric, but some ending thoughts on my experiences while running this dungeon are that I felt very useless. Like, speccing as a full healer was a mistake. I know I said that already, but I really felt like I wasn't needed. I would pop a heal occasionally. Healing word was pretty much good. Occasionally a bastion, but other than that I just stood around, hopped around in circles, and used some at-wills. Like, I didn't really feel the need to be doing anything else. So if I had done half DPS powers and half healing powers, I probably would have felt a lot more beneficial to the group. Okay, now we're on to Paladino. Paladin time. Some strengths of the Paladin is that their healing spells generate a shield on the target that absorbs damage based on the strength of the heal. And that's amazing. That's a mechanic that we don't really have in this game right now, and that's being added in month 16, and to be honest, I really like it. It's really great. Also, the Paladin can be a secondary tank while also being spec'd for healing. They still have their shield and their block ability, however they don't have the 40% bonus hit points, so they can't block as much damage, but you're still able to help out the team when it comes to taking damage if necessary. And lastly, of strengths, they have ways to passively gain divinity without channeling. And that is a large benefit over cleric. I mean, there are ways to gain some divinity whenever something happens, like critically strike. I think that's in the arbiter category actually, but they do have ways to do that, but they're not as frequent and not as constant as Paladin. As far as their weaknesses go, they have no way to move while channeling divinity. Cleric, as we know, has a class feature that allows them to move at half speed, but Paladin does not have this at all. They are basically stuck there until they're done, and that's why having more passive ways to gain divinity is good. And adding on to that, Paladin has the least mobility of the three healers. They are the only one that does not have a dash or a sprint ability onto their shift, and so they're able to tank, but they have to pay for that by not being able to move out of the way of stuff as easily. Now, the Paladin style is basically just shielding. You'll see what I mean whenever you see the video in the background, but you're basically always shielding people. Even if you don't actually need to heal them, applying the heal will still apply a shield, which means that they are protected more. Now, I hate to make a Paladins reference in a Neverwinter video, but this concept of shielding reminds me of a character in the game Paladins named Torvald. And his purpose in the game is basically to shield allies, and that allows them to take extra damage, stay alive longer, and get more stuff done. And that's basically the same concept in Neverwinter. That might have been a little bit confusing because the other game is called Paladins, and I'm talking about a paladin in Neverwinter right now, but I hope it made sense. The shielding ability that paladins have is very powerful whenever you pair it with the correct feats. And I'm not going to talk about feats like I said already because they're all related to healing in some way, but take a look at it and you'll understand what I mean. Maybe. Unless you don't know how to read, and then maybe you won't understand because the pictures aren't very obvious. Now, how exactly does the paladin heal? I don't want there to be any misconception that paladins only shield. They absolutely can have a full healing build, and that is what I did in this video, but the shielding is sort of their primary mechanic. It's called Oath of Devotion. And basically, to sum it up, the stronger your heals are, the more you're going to be shielding the ally. So it's basically like a snowball effect. You heal them for a large amount, they're going to have a larger shield, and they're going to be able to take a lot more damage before you need to heal them again. The only difference in the video compared to what actually happens is that the shields are not going to be double benefiting anymore. That was fixed in the latest patch. What I'm guessing that means is that if there's two paladins in the party, they both cannot apply a shield and it won't stack on top of each other. Well, they both can apply a shield, it just won't stack to twice as much. That was kind of ridiculous. You'll be able to see whenever somebody has that double shielding, whenever their shield bar goes like to their full HP. Anyway, moving on. The first healing ability of Paladins is the Cure Wounds at Will, and as we all know, we are very familiar with that unless you've never played Paladin, but that was really OP in prior to mod 16. You could basically just sit still and spam it, and you'd be good. But Cure Wounds has a pretty lowish magnitude heal, and you can target either yourself with it or an ally. The added effect that you see listed here, heal magnitude is increased if you're protected by Divine Barrier, is not actually there by default. That is listed there because of a feat that I have selected that has that added effect to that power. So, as you can see already, the feats are pretty useful. Now the next power that Paladins have is Divine Touch, and this is the universal one that both Paragons can access. However, it costs much less divinity to use in the Oathkeeper Paragon. This is an AoE heal that has a pretty good magnitude and a really low divinity cost as well, so you're able to use this power pretty often. Next up, we have one called Divine Shelter. This heals yourself and nearby allies for a lower magnitude, but it's still pretty much the same thing as Divine Touch. The only difference is that you target Divine Touch and you can put it wherever. However, Divine Shelter targets with you at the central point and heals yourself and allies around you. Next we have Cleansing Touch. This heals a target ally or yourself for a moderate magnitude, has a really low divinity cost, and it removes a negative status condition like a poison or paralysis and so on. Now we have Circle of Power. Circle of Power doesn't heal directly, but whenever you're standing in it, it restores divinity and increases your outgoing healing by 15%. The AoE area of this is smaller, and it has no benefit to your party members, so if they're standing in it, nothing's going to be any different than if they weren't. And the last encounter is Bond of Virtue. If you remember, this is the one that had the really large circle around the paladin, and anyone standing in it would be healed pretty much instantly. It's pretty different in Mod 16. You create a divine bond with a target party member that you want to target, and anytime you cast a healing spell, the person that you have bonded is healed for 100% of the spell's original effect. So this is something that you could put on your tank, for example, and anytime you heal anyone else in the group, the tank is going to be healed for that amount as well. And tanks are taking a lot of damage in Mod 16. One thing that I noticed that I don't know if I mentioned in the tank comparison video is that I died the most as a tank in my party compared to the other people. Not all the time, but a lot of the time, because you take so much more damage than everyone else. Bond of Virtue does not cost divinity, but it has a cooldown of 30 seconds, which is pretty long. However, the duration is 18 seconds. Next, we have the daily called Lay on Hands. This is the exact same in Mod 15, except it now removes all the negative status effects from the target, as well as healing either the ally or yourself to the max HP. So it's a full heal, full clean wipe basically. No negative status effects for you, no death for you. You are living and you are gonna kill this thing. Yeah, sorry. Okay. Next daily is Sanctuary. Sanctuary used to be the thing that appeared whenever you held shift as a paladin. However, there is no blue circle anymore. There's no more Sanctuary. It's now a daily, and what it does is you have to channel it, and it's a little like bubble thing, similar to the bubbles that surround the demonic heroic encounters in Dreadring. A little, I mean, obviously it's way smaller than that, but you get the point. Anyone who stands inside it has their damage taken reduced by 10%, and there is a heal over time for 12 seconds, or until you cancel it, for a largish magnitude. You're also immune to control effects whenever you're channeling it, which is nice because it would suck if you lost all your action points for nothing. Lastly is a class feature called Aura of Life. Auras are a little bit different in Mod 16. There can only be one activated at a time, and it must be assigned to the first class feature slot. So you can't have two auras in your class features, only one of them will work. What Aura of Life does is whenever you cast a healing encounter power, you heal yourself and nearby party members for a low magnitude. So it's basically like a bonus heal whenever you do something else. So that is all of the Paladin's healing options. And just some final thoughts for Paladin is I love the new playstyle for healer. I hated playing Oath of Devotion Paladin prior to Mod 16. I just hated it. I didn't like it at all. But in Mod 16, I love playing healer Paladin. Like, you're shielding, you're being useful, basically. Like, it's not like cleric where if you don't need to heal and you're not doing damage, you're not useful. But as Paladin, I always feel like I'm doing something and having some benefit because of the shielding and tanking capabilities that they have. Last up on our list of healers is the Soul Weaver Warlock. Hold on, I had an idea. I need to write it down before I forget. Okay, I'm done. Back to work. Warlocks are a very interesting class for healing in Mod 16. I mean, I don't want to sound too biased, but I purely hated warlocks in mod 15 and prior. I just could not stand to play them. I did not like their playstyle at all. Never had any fun. I just hated every single aspect of it. But in mod 16, as of right now, warlock is my favorite class, and that is really, really weird to say. I never thought I would say that once in my life. But yeah, moving on. Some strengths that the warlocks have is that they are very good at AoE healing. There's no targeting involved, it's all automatic in an area, for the most part. They can regenerate their soul sparks with at-wills directly, and neither of the other healers have the option of using at-wills to generate divinity. Also, warlock heals are pretty much constant, but they're all smaller heals over time. And they have really, really strong healing feats, probably the strongest feats of the 3 healers, in my opinion. I am actually going to talk about one of the feats here because it ties into what I'm going to talk about at one point, but you'll see. Some weaknesses of the warlock is that they need a lot of defenses and a lot of hit points because of self-damage, and I'll talk about that a little bit more in a second. They cannot move while they're absorbing soul sparks using their essence drain, which is their tab, /R1/RB for you console people. They also only have 1 healing daily, whereas the other classes have 2 or 3. But that's it for the weaknesses. Now let's talk about the style a little bit. I know you're all a little bit concerned and confused maybe because of the self-damage thing I mentioned, so let's talk about that. Warlocks have a really, really unique style, and I love it. Sorry, I'm sounding biased again. A few of the powers that they have cause you to sacrifice your own health to heal your allies, and obviously, at first glance, or on paper, or whatever you want to call it, that sounds really bad because it makes you sound weaker than the other healers. But it's actually really, really good. There's just some downfalls that I'll talk about later. And like I said, their heals are smaller, constant heals over time, and I think that fits in a lot better with the style of mod 16 combat, because like I mentioned at the beginning of the video, your health is constantly going up and down during a fight. You're never either going to be full health or dead most of the time, so the larger heals are actually less beneficial than the constant heals over time. But that's just my opinion. Maybe you think it's different. Maybe you think differently. That's fine. Moving on, let's talk about the healing powers of Warlock. I am going to start off with a mechanic though, and that is the soul sparks. Soul sparks, there are up to 30 of them, and they passively regenerate over time when you're out of combat. They are passively at full, whereas the other Paragon, the Hellbringer one, they start at empty, you know. So whenever you have full soul sparks, your healing is going to be increased by 15%. Each soul spark increases your healing by 0.5% each, and there's 30 of them. And that's some math that I can actually do in my head, imagine that. But that is all I really wanted to mention about that, is that you have a source that is pretty much constantly available to increase your outgoing healing, and this makes up for the fact that you're not going to have very much wisdom compared to the other healers. Next up is another mechanic, but also something worth pointing out, Essence Drain, your tab /R1/RB mechanic. This is one that you channel, and the longer you channel it, you are draining more of the enemy's souls. You deal damage to them while you're doing this, and it also restores your own health and soul sparks. So you're basically healing yourself whenever you're pressing tabs. You don't have to worry about being in the way of attacks necessarily, because you'll be healing for the damage that you take. The other 2 healers don't heal themselves whenever they're channeling divinity. I'm out of breath for some reason. The first power that warlocks have to heal is an at-will called Soul Reconstruction. And this is similar to the Cure Wounds or Blessings of Light, I think it was called, that clerics have. It is the single target healing at will. You're channeling soul sparks into them, basically giving them other people's souls, because maybe they're bad people and you want to fix that. That's not actually how that works, sorry. Next up, we have the encounter Pillar of Power. Heads up guys, this is still very relevant in mod 16, maybe even more relevant than before. Maybe not, maybe the same. It's up 100% of the time pretty much. The cooldown is shorter than the duration of the power, which is different than pretty much every other power in this game at the moment. While you stand inside it, and for 3 seconds after leaving, your damage and healing are increased by 10%. Also, if the allies stand in it, they gain 5% increased damage and are healed for 20 magnitude every second. So it's a low magnitude, but it is a constant heal, and it's going to be up 100% of the time, so you're constantly healing them without any effort whatsoever, except for pressing Q every 10 seconds. Or whatever button you have it bound to. Next ability is Shatter Spark. This costs 3 soul sparks, and you release energy into yourself and nearby allies for a pretty decent magnitude heal. This is your quote-unquote large heal of the warlock, because everything else is sort of slower and heal over time, and this is sort of your little bit of burst heal. It's very easy to keep up, you're pretty much always going to have it available, and if you don't, you can regenerate soul sparks using your at-wills real quick, or holding tab real quick. Like, it's so easy! Okay, I'm sorry, I'm actually very biased. I'm going to try my very bestest not to be biased again until the end of the video where I'm actually allowed to be biased. Ow! I got bit by a mosquito. Next encounter is Wraith Shadow. You summon shadows to smother your enemy in a sickly mass of darkness, applying a damage over time that siphons life to allies within 80 feet. So it's an AoE encounter. That heals for a pretty decent magnitude, and it lasts for 12 seconds. Only costs 2 soul sparks, by the way. Next up is Harrow Storm. I actually really like using this one. This is a targeted power, the only targeted power of warlocks, and you put a storm at a target location, and then for the next 6 seconds, the storm damages enemies and heals allies who stand in it for a pretty decent magnitude. Stacking this with the Pillar of Power and other damage over time heal over time heals is great. And lastly, we have Warlock's Bargain, and this is where we start getting into the mechanic that I talked about of self-damage and sacrificing your own health. This is the first option for that. You sacrifice 20% of your maximum life and heal allies within 80 feet. It also gives you the added effect of increasing your outgoing healing by 10%, and it removes 1 negative status effect from each target. So if you're in a safe spot, know you're not going to be hit for a huge amount, or can heal yourself for a good amount pretty instantly, Warlock's Bargain is pretty fun to use. Just don't accidentally use it when you're already at low health, because you'll die. In case you couldn't tell, I've done that a couple times already, and then I switched to a different power because I kept accidentally doing it. Moving on! The only daily that warlocks have that heal is one called Soul Pact, and again, we're talking about sacrificing your health. You form a soul pact with up to 4 other allies, so basically your whole party. I don't know why they don't just say your party. You damage yourself while healing and buffing your allies. The heal is pretty large, and it increases the damage resistance of the targets by 10% for 10 seconds, but you lose 2% of your maximum hit points every second. So it's a total of 20% HP that you're sacrificing. Next, we have a class feature called Borrowed Time. This is only a self-heal, but I still thought it was worth mentioning. Each soul spark used on a power will heal you for 1% of your maximum hit points. So, as you're spending soul sparks to cast healing and counter powers, you're also healing yourself without even trying. Imagine that. And lastly, another class feature called Essence Mastery. This causes Essence Drain to deal 5% more damage and healing. Remember, that is your tab power that you use to refill your soul sparks. So it's basically like you're healing yourself for more, you're damaging for more, while also getting more soul sparks. So it's like a win-win. Win. That's 3 things. Now, I am going to talk about one feat for warlocks, because I think it adds to what I was talking about, and it's something that you really want to consider. The feat that I'm going to talk about is Life Bind. There are pros and cons to this, and this specifically is why I said you need a lot of defense and hit points. If you're not using this, it won't be as noticeable, but still. Let me actually explain what it does. You create a bond of life with allies within 50 feet, so all of them, and you redirect 25% of the damage they are taking to yourself. And the effect no longer functions if your health drops below 30%. It also gives you 2,500 increased defense. So let's recap. All the damage your allies are taking, you are taking 25% of that, and they are only taking 75% as much. So that's huge. It stops if your health drops below 30%. However, there is a little caveat to that, and that is, let's say your health is at 29%, so that effect is no longer functioning, and then you get hit by an enemy and then you're dead. That has happened to me quite often. You have to be somewhere where you're not going to get hit at all whenever you're using this, and it's pretty bad to use this in AoE situations with a bunch of strong monsters like the Hill in FBI. Like, I tried and then I had to turn it off because it was just, I just couldn't. It was too strong. Now, I probably would have been able to manage it if I had more defenses and hit points, but at the time I did not, so I had to switch to the other one, but that's that. Now, that is it for all 3 healers. But some overall thoughts for the Warlock: it was the best class to play with for me. I really enjoyed it. I always felt like I was doing something. I felt very useful, very engaged in the combat, and it was a lot of fun. Now I know that you're all expecting me to tell you which one is the best, so I will do a little crowning of sorts, like I did in the tank comparison video. There are going to be 4 categories this time though. The categories are mobility, most protection, most damage potential, and most fun. I'm not going to do most healing because all of them have really good healing potential, so there's no point in doing that one. So the healer with the most mobility is definitely the Warlock. They have a long sprint that they can use whenever they feel like it, basically. Clerics only have a short dash, and Paladins have no mobility at all. Now, the class with the most protection, as I'm sure you all already guessed, is Paladin. The shielding that they have is top-notch and can't be rivaled by any other healer. The healer with the most damage potential is, as you might have already guessed, Cleric. While Warlocks can do decent DPS, and so can Paladins too if they're in the right situations, Cleric just already has feats and encounters built in to increase their damage. It's just going to mostly be AoE damage. The potential is there for clerics to do decent DPS. And lastly, the one that you've all been waiting for! Which healer is the most fun? I'll give you 5 seconds to guess which one you think I'm going to say. It's totally not obvious or anything. Okay. The most fun healer in Mod 16 right now is Warlock. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. These types of videos take a really long time to make and I have to put a lot of effort into them. Thanks for watching the whole thing if you did. If you want to leave a comment on the video, tell me what your favorite flavor of chewing gum is. Do you like the standard mint kind, or is there a special flavor that you like? Like, there's some really weird flavors out there. Alright, thanks for watching or listening or whatever you did. I'll see you tomorrow in the next video, and have a good day. Bye.